So this right here is the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite, which is like the 7th, 8th, God knows what Xiaomi smartphone that has launched so far in 2021. It's like every time I'm getting ready to take a week off, Xiaomi pops up like, hey motherfuckers, guess what? We got another smartphone for you. Now Xiaomi's Redmi Note 10 Pro, which launched earlier in 2021, is still one of my favorite budget blowers right now. And the Mi 11 Lite shares a lot of the DNA with that Redmi Note 10 Pro, including that lush OLED screen and some well and truly feature-packed camera tech. So the question then is, what is new with the Mi 11 Lite, and is it worth picking up over that Redmi phone? Well, I've had my Sims stuffed inside of the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite for the past week or so, and here's my in-depth review. And for more on the latest greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now this surprisingly slender wee chappy sports quite a simple but an enjoyable design, with a reflective super shiny backend that looks glass but is actually just your bog standard budget plastic. You can grab it in peach pink or bubblegum blue. Those are your more colourful options if you'd rather not go for this standard mirror black effect. Although no matter your choice, that shiny surface then becomes a proper smudge fest after just a few minutes of fondling. About a dozen times a day I had to give the Mi 11 Lite a proper good buffing to send that grease straight back to hell. And oh yeah, the Mi 11 Lite is a slippery wee bugger as well, thanks to that frictionless back. Stick it down on any smooth surface that isn't 100% completely flat, and then you can just watch it casually glide its way to the edge before hurling itself over into oblivion. Don't worry mate, I know how you feel. Xiaomi's budget blower is impressively light at just over 150 grams, so it's great for anyone with prepubescent child biceps like myself. Though at 6.55 inches, it is a bit of a bugger to use one-handed, that is, unless you call on a bit of MiUI help. And yeah, the Mi 11 Lite may have a placky back like pretty much every budget blower, but at least it's coated in Gorilla Glass 5 up front to keep that display pristine. And at least the back end, so far, touch wood, reasonably scuff-free. A couple of tiny little scratches down here at the bottom end, getting pretty standard for a budget blower. And yeah, you don't get an official IP rating for water resistance, but the Mi 11 Lite isn't bothered by a bit of moisture. I've sploshed all kinds of stuff on this thing over the Easter weekend. That sounds all kinds of wrong, but yeah, let's just move on. And it's been absolutely fine. The software experience here definitely gave me a hefty dose of deja vu, because it's basically the same as the Redmi Note 10 Pro, the Poco X3 Pro, and most of the budget phones that I've reviewed in 2021. What you get is Android 11 with Xiaomi's own MiUI 12 launcher spattered all over it, like a bit of brown sauce on a cocktail sausage. Not gonna lie, I'm kind of a little bit sick of banging on about MiUI at this point, and I'm sure a lot of you lovely morphos are sick of hearing me bang on about it as well, but here's a brief recap of the good and the bad bits for anyone who's missed out so far. So version 12 of the MiUI launcher mostly retains that stock Android vibe. There aren't any glaring omissions. You've got an apps tray by default, thank God. You've got the likes of the Google Discover feed, you've got your notifications bar, which is easier to drag down. And no, there aren't any adverts cluttering up MiUI as some rumors would have it. The only place I saw any adverts was when I was installing a new app, and those can be quickly and easily disabled. Didn't notice any obvious glaring bugs or anything when I was using the Mi 11 Lite. One time when I was Skyping with the folks back home, the cameras froze up, but that might have been down to Skype rather than MiUI, because frankly Skype's a mess. But yeah, 100% MiUI can be a little bit janky at times, and on the surface level, for instance, just skimming around through the UI can be a little bit juddery, which kind of detracts from the overall smooth performance. On the flip side though, Xiaomi has added some worthy features to the Android stable, including a gaming mode and some cool video tools. And something I always bring up in these MiUI videos as well is the excellent control center, which has been wholesale lifted from Apple, which gives you fast access to all kinds of nifty toggles and also your smart home gear as well. But anyway, if you are interested in learning more about MiUI, I have done a full video on MiUI 12, so go check that out. As far as the storage goes here on the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite, well, you've got choice of either 64 or 128 gigs of storage. Some budget blowers, they tend to have 128 gigs as standard, so that's slightly miserly. But what's more annoying here on the Mi 11 Lite is the fact that you don't get any support for microSD memory card expansion. And that is a real damn shame, because that's no doubt going to put some heavy users off. You know, you have that support on the Redmi Note 10 Pro, you've got it on the Poco X3 Pro, you've got it on the Realme 8 Pro, you've got it on pretty much every other budget blower out there, so no excuse. So let's have a shufty at that 6.55-inch AMOLED screen, which matches a lot of recent budget rivals like the Realme 8 Pro and Xiaomi's own Redmi Note 10 Pro for visual glory. It's a full HD plus resolution panel, which means crisp images when you're checking out high-def content, plus the 10-bit color smarts means that your photos and other bits can be naturally reproduced, or you can dive into those display settings and really make the colors pop. The Mi 11 Lite also supports HDR10+ content in streaming services like Netflix, so no real complaints at all. When I bumped up that brightness to maximum levels, I found I had no trouble with visibility outdoors, even when wearing shades on a really sunshiny day like we've surprisingly had over the Easter weekend. So yeah, reading messages, watching videos, all that good stuff, no trouble. And you've got a 90Hz refresh option here on the Mi 11 Lite as well, so it's not 120Hz like some recent rivals like the Poco X3 Pro, but to my knackered old eyes, 90Hz and 120Hz both offer the same sort of smoothness anyway. And as I mentioned before, unfortunately with the MiUI slight jankiness, you do get a little bit of juddering as you're flicking about anyway, which kind of detracts from that lovely smooth performance. Your audio is blasted out of stereo speakers, and that's just fine for some YouTube or Netflix action with a strong top volume and fairly balanced sound. Bluetooth streaming was tops as well, no issues with the connection strength or the stability. Even had a good bit of LDAC action when I was streaming to my Sony headphones, really enjoyed what I was hearing, and it's just as well that the Bluetooth is so good because unfortunately, for some reason, the Mi 11 does not offer any headphone jack action. And I could only assume that they decided to kill the microSD memory card support and that headphone jack in order to get the phone quite so slim and so light, but it's not a trade-off I'd really particularly want to make. If the Mi 11 Lite was super compact as well, then yep, fine, okay, I could live with it, but honestly, no. Now, like that Redmi Note 10 Pro, the Xiaomi handset is powered by the Snapdragon 732G platform, backed by a respectable 6 gigs of RAM. And I've already mentioned the slightly juddery performance I experienced when I was skimming through this not quite so elegant launcher, but apart from that, I had bugger all problems with the performance. Apps load up quickly and run as expected, and gamers delight because you can spend a dull afternoon merrily murdering online foes with no thermal issues or other complaints. PUBG and Call of Duty fans are definitely well served, especially as that touchscreen is supremely responsive. And you've got those handy gaming features to block calls, screenshot your achievements, all that jazz. However, if you do want to play more demanding titles like Genshin Impact, then you'll definitely have to have a gander at the Poco X3 Pro instead, which packs in a Snapdragon 860 chipset. And this is just a standard LTE budget handset. There's no 5G support offered here by the standard Mi 11 Lite, but Xiaomi has also launched at the same time a Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite 5G, which uses the Snapdragon 780G chipset instead with 5G smarts. So if you want yourself a proper bit of future-proofing, then definitely grab one of those little bleeders. Now, the Mi 11 Lite certainly doesn't boast one of the biggest batteries around as far as budget blowers go. It's a 4,250 mAh stuffed inside of here, but I still found that was more than up to the job, even on really intensive days. So for instance, the most intensive day over the Easter weekend, I got up nice and early. I used it as a sat-nav for about an hour or so in the car. I was streaming music for a good sort of 3 or 4 hours throughout the day, podcasts as well. Used the camera a ton, and I didn't stagger into bed until well after midnight, and I still had 10% battery remaining. That's with roughly 6 hours of screen time in total. I found that most of the days I'd end up with about 20 to 30% left at the end of the day. So yeah, no worries whatsoever if you're going to be away from home for a full one. Meanwhile, the 33-watt fast charging is pretty standard for this sort of budget price point, as is the complete lack of wireless charging. Now, the triple lens rear cam on the Mi 11 Lite is spearheaded by a very capable 64 megapixel primary sensor, which deals pretty well with a range of testing conditions. You get 16 megapixel photos by default thanks to the pixel bit in tech, and my test photos were similar to the Redmi Note 10 Pro. I'm talking detail packed and with admirable color capture for a budget blower, even when that lighting is a bit tricky. Moving subjects are often cleanly captured, no blur to ruin that pic, even when you're shooting quite up close. And the portrait mode can add an effective bit of background bokeh action if you fancy it. HDR situations are handled fairly admirably as well, although you will notice some saturation and blowouts if you do push it too far. While low light snaps can be rescued somewhat with the night mode, even if it doesn't exactly have a particularly big impact. An 8 megapixel ultra-wide angle lens offers a very different angle of the action when you need it, albeit with usual distortion and serious color compromises. And you've also got a 5 megapixel macro snapper if you want to shoot something really up close for reasons. And video recording is usually just as dependable as the photo smarts, with the occasional focus issue aside. At that 4K 30 frames per second level, you can expect a sharp picture and pretty decent image stabilization to boot, while audio was cleanly picked up both in front of and behind of the lens. And last up, there's a 20 megapixel selfie snapper up front, which I again bugger all complaints with really, apart from the fact that you've got to knock off that beauty mode shenanigans straight away to avoid looking all artificially smooth. This again comes with the usual portrait, smarts, etc., and even does a pretty decent job indoors. So that right there's my full, final, frank review of the Xiaomi Mi 11 Lite, and I did enjoy using it as my full-time smartphone these past few days, but I've got to say, the fact that they've killed off the headphone jack and the microSD memory card expandability makes me think, why would you pick this up ahead of the Redmi Note 10 Pro if both of them are available around the same sort of price point? I do love how gloriously skinny and light this thing is, but honestly, it's not a good enough trade-off when that headphone jack is gone, because I do use that headphone jack a fair bit in my day-to-day existence. If those two little pain points don't particularly bother you, then I'd say jump on board. It's some slick hardware for a nice price. I just kind of wish that Xiaomi would slow down a bit when it comes to its budget phone launches, because they're all starting to sort of blend into one a bit. But anyway, enough waffle from me. That's what I think. What do you guys think? It'd be great to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do poke, subscribe, and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech if you haven't done already. And have yourselves a mighty fine rest of the week. Cheers everyone. Love you.